Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking on what might be the single biggest legal challenge of the 20th century. It's 1945, the world is in ruins, and the Allies are facing this colossal question. How do you prosecute crimes that are, and I'm quoting here, so malignant and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored?
That phrase just sets the stage perfectly, doesn't it? Because we're not just talking about war. We're talking about basically creating international law from almost nothing.
Right.
This deep dive is really about understanding that the Nuremberg Trials weren't just a historical event. They were the moment international criminal law was truly born.
So our mission today is to dig into the architecture of that justice. We'll look at the key American figure who really designed it, Robert H. Jackson.
Yep.
Then we'll unpack the legal concepts they had to, invent, especially crimes against humanity. And we have to trace the history of the one big defense that was just completely rejected.
The superior orders plea. But, before we even get to the law, we have to realize the trial itself almost didn't happen.
Really? It seems so inevitable now.
Not at all. Many powerful figures, Winston Churchill being the most famous, were pushing for summary executions. Just, round up the top Nazi leaders and be done with it.
So no trial, no due process.
None. They felt the crimes were so obvious that a long legal process was, frankly, unnecessary, maybe even humiliating for the Allies.
So the whole idea of a legitimate trial was actually controversial.
Oh, deeply. The British War Cabinet, even as late as April 1945, was on record saying a full judicial trial was out of the question.
So what changed?
The United States. It was really President Truman who insisted on a legal reckoning. The Americans understood that this was about more than just punishment.
It was about showing their system was better.
Precisely. To show that even the worst criminals deserve a day in court, that the rule of law had to reach, as they said, men who possess themselves of great power. Otherwise, it just looks like the winners punishing the losers.
And the man they picked to lead this effort was Robert H. Jackson.
Jackson is such a compelling character. I mean, he wasn't born into some elite legal family. He was a largely self-taught lawyer from a tiny town in New York. Shrewsbury, yes. But he had this incredible rise, and he holds a distinction that is still unique in U.S. history.
That's right. He's the only person to have served as Solicitor General, Attorney General, and a Supreme Court Justice. That's an incredible range of experience.
And it's so crucial for what he was about to do. I mean, think about it. The Solicitor General argues the government's biggest cases. The Attorney General is the top cop. And a justice is the final judge.
He understood power from every angle.
Exactly. How it's used and how it should be limited. It gave him the perfect lens to prosecute people who had totally corrupted an entire state.
But he didn't see himself as a prosecutor, did he? He once said he was anything but a warrior.
He was a legal scholar, a writer, not a hunter of war criminals. But when Truman appointed him on May 2nd, 1945, he knew. He called it perhaps the greatest opportunity ever presented to an American lawyer.
And he was suddenly on the biggest legal stage in history, prosecuting crimes that didn't even have names yet.
And his opening statement, wow, it was 4 hours long in the fall of 1945. For most of the world, that was the first time they really, truly understood the scale of it all.
The systematic nature of it.
Yes. He used the Nazis' own meticulous records against them to lay out the entire plan. He promised the court, we will give you undeniable proofs of incredible events.
And he did. He read from documents like the report on the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto.
It's just chilling. He read how Nazi officers described people jumping from burning buildings only when the heat was unbearable, before they were hunted down in the sewers.
And that intersection of cold, bureaucratic language and just absolute evil, that's what made it so powerful.
And Jackson's focus on defining and constraining power wasn't just for Nuremberg. His legal work back home still echoes today.
You're talking about the Youngstown steel seizure case.
Exactly. His opinion in Youngstown Sheet and 2 Covey Sawyer in 1952 is, it's still foundational for understanding presidential power.
For listeners who aren't constitutional lawyers, can you break that down? Why is it so important?
Because he gave us a clear framework. He basically created 3 zones for presidential power. Zone 1 is when the president has Congress's support, maximum power.
Okay.
Zone 3 is when the president acts directly against what Congress wants. That's his power at its lowest.
And the middle zone, the zone of twilight.
That's the gray area. It's where Congress hasn't said yes or no.
Oh.
And Jackson said that in that zone, a president's power depends on, the specific situation and what history suggests. He was essentially building legal guardrails to prevent exactly the kind of unchecked executive power he had just prosecuted in Germany.
So you have this master of constitutional law who's all about limiting power at home, suddenly in a place where he has to invent the rules because there aren't any.
That was the biggest obstacle, a massive legal vacuum.
Right.
Like you said, a lot of what the Nazis did was technically legal under German law. So the prosecutors at the International Military Tribunal, the IMT, they faced these huge legal dilemmas.
The act of state principle, right? That one country can't just judge what another country's leaders do at home.
Exactly. And war crimes, traditionally, were about things that happened during a war, usually to enemy soldiers.
Not a state's crimes against its own citizens.
Right, so they had to answer this really deep philosophical question. What happens when the law itself is evil? There's this concept, the Radbruch formula, which basically says a grossly unjust law isn't really a law at all. The IMT had to decide if morality could, in fact, overrule national law.
And they did that by structuring the indictment around 4 key charges.
4 counts. Count 1 was conspiracy, which was the U.S. contribution.
Yeah.
It framed everything not as random acts, but as one big plan.
Okay.
Count 2 was crimes against peace. That was the British focus, going after the act of starting an aggressive war in the first place. And then you had counts 3 and 4.
War crimes, and the big one, crimes against humanity.
Crimes against humanity. That was the breakthrough. It let them go beyond the battlefield.
So what was the official definition?
The Nuremberg Charter defined it as murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, and other inhumane acts committed against civilian populations before and during the war. It was the legal tool they needed to prosecute the persecution that happened inside Germany against Germans.
But there was a key limitation on it at first, wasn't there? Something a lot of people miss.
There was, and it's important. The IMT was very worried about being accused of making up law after the fact. So they ruled that a crime against humanity had to be connected to one of the other crimes, like the plan for aggressive war.
Wait, so the persecution of Jews inside Germany before 1939
Was initially ruled by the judgment not to be a crime against humanity because the prosecution couldn't, in the court's view, satisfactorily prove the link to the war plan at that stage.
That's a pretty fine legal point.
It is, but it shows they weren't just a kangaroo court. They were being incredibly cautious. Of course, later international law got rid of that limitation entirely.
And that second count, crimes against peace, that was Jackson's baby. He called aggressive war the supreme international crime.
He did. He argued it contains within itself the accumulated evil of the whole. His point was that all the other horrors, the war crimes, the atrocities, they all flowed from that first decision to launch an aggressive war. It was the linchpin.
So when the defendants finally had to answer these charges, what was their main defense?
It was the one we all know, Befehl's Befehl.
An order is an order, the Nuremberg defense.
Yes, especially the military guys like Keitel and Jodl. They argued that they were just soldiers following orders from Hitler, that their military oath meant they had no choice and therefore no personal responsibility.
But that wasn't a new idea, was it? Courts had dealt with this before.
Oh, for centuries. The first time we really see it rejected in a modern sense was way back in 1474. A guy named Peter von Hagenbach was executed for atrocities, even though he claimed he was just following orders. So the principle existed.
But it wasn't settled law.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And after World War I, at the Leipzig trials, the German courts mostly let their own guys off the hook if they claimed they were following orders.
Yeah.
That created a huge international backlash and a feeling that, okay, next time, we need a definitive ruling on this.
And Nuremberg provided it.
Absolutely. It was written down in what we now call Nuremberg Principle V. It says, and this is key, that acting on the order of a superior does not relieve him from responsibility under international law, provided a moral choice was in fact possible to him.
A moral choice, that's the heart of it.
That's the entire pivot. It says, yes, soldiers obey orders, but you don't lose your humanity. You don't lose your conscience. When an order is manifestly evil, you still have a choice.
And modern law has only strengthened that idea.
Completely. The Rome Statute, which created the International Criminal Court, is explicit. It says orders to commit genocide or crimes against humanity are, by definition, manifestly unlawful. You can't obey them. Period.
So to prove all this, the IMT trial was just this mountain of evidence.
A mountain. 403 open sessions. They presented 4,600 captured German documents, thousands of photos, miles of film. Jackson called the proofs undeniable. because they came from the Nazis' own files.
But the main trial was really about the top leadership. The grittier details of the Holocaust came out more in the later trials, right?
Yes, the subsequent Nuremberg Trials. Those were run just by the U.S. military, and they focused on specific groups, doctors, lawyers, and the actual executioners.
Which brings us to the Einsatzgruppen trial.
The trial of the commanders of the SS Mobile Death Squads. These were the units that went behind the lines and conducted mass shootings.
They were responsible for murdering around 2 million people.
An unbelievable number, and the court itself struggled with that. They wrote in their judgment, the number of deaths set at 1 million is but an abstract number. One cannot grasp the full cumulative terror of murder 1 million times repeated.
So the main trial ends in the fall of 1946, 12 death sentences, some prison terms, 3 acquittals. But the story of the subsequent trials has a more complicated ending.
It does, and it's probably the most sobering part of this whole legacy. Cold War politics started to creep in.
How so?
Well, take that Einsatzgruppen trial. The court handed down 14 death sentences, but in the end, only 4 were actually carried out.
So 10 death sentences were changed to prison terms. Why?
It all came down to geopolitics. By the early 1950s, the U.S. desperately needed West Germany as an ally against the Soviet Union. And as part of rebuilding Germany and bringing them into the Western fold, there was immense political pressure inside Germany to, show leniency to convicted war criminals.
So the sentences were reduced to make a political ally happy?
In essence, yes. The U.S. High Commissioner, John McCloy, oversaw these commutations. He argued the legal principles had been established, but the political reality was that many of these sentences were cut short. By 1958, every single convict from those subsequent trials was out of prison.
That's pretty shocking. It shows that even when you get the conviction, politics can still get in the way of justice.
It always can, but it doesn't erase the main legacy.
Which goes back to what you said at the start.
That individuals, not just states, are responsible under international law. That idea, individual accountability for the powerful, is the foundation for everything that came after. The tribunals for Yugoslavia, for Rwanda, and the ICC today all stand on Nuremberg's shoulders.
And what was Jackson's final takeaway from all this after it was all over?
In his final report to Truman, he looked at the bigger picture. He said what ultimately doomed the Third Reich was the recoil of the Nazi blows at liberty.
What did he mean by that?
He argued that because they crushed all dissent, all freedom of speech and press, they blinded themselves. Eventually, even high-ranking officers dared not warn the people or the fewer that they were taking the road to destruction. Their own tyranny made them unable to see reality.
So suppressing the truth is, in the end, a fatal mistake.
Which leaves the biggest question for you, the listener, today. The entire legal basis of Nuremberg rejecting superior orders, creating crimes against humanity, it all rests on this idea that some things are so wrong, no law can make them right.
It puts the burden of moral choice back on the individual.
It does. So the question is, what unjust law or powerful command in your own world might one day be seen as invalid because of that higher ethic? The challenge that Nuremberg leaves us with is our own commitment to thinking critically and to making that moral choice, even in the face of authority.